Hi everyone, it's Daisy again from DeviantArt or Paralytic Process, and today we are doing the second video of live readings and discussions of my poetry by request. Today we're going to be discussing Tachycardia, and this is a really hard one for people not only to understand, but it is really heavy in its theme, its emotion. It's just really sad if we're going to be completely honest. This is one of those poems where real life is put directly on paper. I'm sure we've all felt that kind of intense sadness, especially when it comes to someone that we deeply care about, and that's what Tachycardia is about. It was actually written in 2009, so that was a long time ago. But the emotion, I think, in many ways still rings true. It's part of my collection called The Weather Near the Atlantic, and it's part of the first section of The Weather Near the Atlantic called Overcast. The way that The Weather Near the Atlantic has been divided up was into three sections. Overcast, the Bourgeon process, and Clear. I can't actually remember what the third one was because it's been such a long time. But many people, whenever they read the poems from my collection, from that specific collection, I got many comments back in the day of, are you ever going to be happy again? Because this stuff is so depressing, just heavy, and it hurts to even read it. Another one of the poems on the live reading request list, Butterfly Collection, is also part of The Weather Near the Atlantic, and I'll be discussing that one pretty soon as well. To answer some more questions first, before I get started with the actual reading and discussing of Tachycardia, I tend to write a lot darker than some people may be comfortable with. I get asked a lot about depression, if I'm okay. I'll have people send me private messages like, hey, I'm just checking up on you. Are you feeling okay? Is there anything I can do? And to be honest, most of the time when I write, it's just dark just because. I think writers, we tend to look at the world in a unique way from everyone else, and I think my spin is just a little darker. Not necessarily because I'm depressed, although I do think writers tend to be more prone to depression than maybe some other fields. But I just write in a dark manner. A lot of my poems, even if they're happy and about something really romantic, such as Silence and Separation, which is about my husband, they just seem to have a dark twist on them. It might be because Stephen King is one of my favorite, authors. It might be because I love Edgar Allan Poe. I think every writer has their own style, and that just seems to be mine. However, collections like The Weather Near the Atlantic, I was severely depressed, and I'll explain why shortly, but there's always an ebb and flow in our writing. Sometimes our writing is great when we're just sad and in the deep trenches of anxiety and depression. Other times our writing is great because we're just so happy, full of life, things are going great, but our style pretty much stays the same. And I think that's really one of the traits that make my writing interesting. So no, I'm okay. Don't worry about me. That's just how I write. But thank you for your support and for asking, because most people just don't care. So now we will move on to the actual reading and discussion of tachycardia. There's a lot of heavy imagery in here, and don't worry if you don't understand it the first time I read it, or even if you read it in the comments. I'm going to put it in the description. If you're reading it and you're like, man, I don't understand any of this, don't worry. I will explain it and discuss it. And then all those pieces and images will make sense. So, tachycardia. I walked away that day. He stood, perfect tragedy, eyes brittle as my intentions, bending over backwards, but all my apologies and futures and failures could not make up for my selfishness, such brutal wind slipping through the cracks in his bones. His winged fixtures, too weak to fight calloused hands, change in breath, my rotating seasons persuade his cardiac arrest, the regret rising as acid reflux, and he is consistently inconsequential to the pain and the sad state of our gut-wrenching affairs. I walked away that day, corpses to my ankles. I walked away and tripped over his thinning skin. It broke my heart in 7 places. Whoa. I feel those emotions just reading it, and I have not read this poem in years, out loud anyway. Those emotions still ring true. This specific poem is about, and many, like I mentioned in the Weather Near the Atlantic collection, it's about romance and heartbreak and death. I dated a guy he was my first love. I cared very deeply for him. And he, like most, teenage romances, this was early college, it ended. It wasn't really anything either of us did. We were apart at the time, and things just went their course. But it broke my heart so bad. I'm sure everyone can relate to that. First loves, they leave an impression on you, even after you go on and get married to the love of your life, which I did. I never forgot him. It hurt when I actually moved back to the same town, because just seeing him, it made me just want to break down, because I felt at the time we were this perfect match, and I didn't understand why he would have broken up with me. To make matters worse, I was angry. I was so angry that he hurt me, and very unfortunately, he died shortly after we broke up in a car crash. And all of that anger and all of that hate that I had for him turned into guilt. I felt that I killed him in a way, because I wanted him to hurt as much as he hurt me. And in the end, he died. So that's really heavy to talk about, but that tachycardia really encapsulates what I felt. This was before he passed, but this was very shortly before he died. And so let's just break it down stanza by stanza, so you can get a better idea of how my emotions during that time translated into the imagery. I walked away that day. Of course, knowing the backstory, it's very easy to say, okay, she walked away from the relationship. It was more of, I felt I had to try to let go, and that was me just trying to walk away. But on the actual day that he had broken up with me, I walked away from him. So I put that experience into the opening to draw the reader in. He stood, perfect tragedy, eyes as brittle as my intentions, bending over backwards, but all my apologies and futures and failures could not make up for my selfishness, such brutal wind slipping through the cracks in his bones. I think when everyone goes through that like one defining heartbreak in their life, they do a lot of crazy things. For me, it was apologizing. It was me trying to be perfect. It was me just trying to fix whatever was broken. And that's really what this stanza described. He felt bad that he was breaking up with me. He actually cried because we had been together for a while, about 2 years or so, and I don't know. It was just one of those weird kind of situations where I'm heartbroken and confused of, if you're crying, why are you breaking up with me type thing. And no matter what I said to try and fix it, I'm sorry, I'll do better if I did something to hurt you. I can do this, I can do that, just please don't end it. It didn't make a difference. Could not make up for my selfishness, which refers to I didn't want to break up. I didn't want things to change. And that hurt him, that I was so distraught, interestingly enough. So that was the brutal wind slipping through the cracks in his bones. The second stanza, his winged fixtures, too weak to fight calloused hands, change in breath, my rotating seasons persuade his cardiac arrest. The regret rising as acid reflux, and he is consistently inconsequential to the pain and the sad state of our gut-wrenching affairs. Winged fixtures, he was kind of, out of both of us at the time, he was more of the angel. So those are the winged fixtures. He had those angel wings, and I was messed up, and, in my head at the time, I was messed up. I wasn't as good as perhaps he was morally or academically, or, I was just really putting myself down because I felt that because he broke up with me, that meant I was worthless. And we all know that that's not true, but when you're in the throes of those kind of emotions, it's easy to believe that. And of course, my calloused hands, those are me trying to bring them back down to where I was. Just tell me what I did wrong. Why is this happening? The regret. There must have been something that I could have done better. I could have been prettier. I could have been smarter. I could have been blah, 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 blah. And it just seemed to me that even though he seemed visibly upset, that I was upset, he wasn't really understanding how much pain I felt. And that was, he's consistently inconsequential to the pain and the sad state of our gut-wrenching affairs. The next stanza, I walked away that day corpses to my ankles. How many lives have we left to start a new life? It's like that song, gosh, I just lost the line. Every end has a beginning, or every beginning has an end. And that's what I felt like was happening. My life was dead before me. All the people that I had come to know through my relationship with him, it's like our relationships were gone too. When people break up, they don't just break up with themselves. There's friends involved, there's family involved, a lot of people involved, and I felt like all of that just died, and I was wading through them trying to get to the other side of that. I walked away and tripped over his thinning skin. There was some points where he tried to be my best friend, try to make things okay again. And to me, it was like he was, in the beginning, I felt he was losing his resolve for us to stay broken up. But I couldn't be around him anymore. I was so angry and so sad, that it was painful. It was physically painful to be around him. So I made the decision to not see him ever again. Talk to him. I deleted him from all social media, from my phone. I had to walk away from him, and I think that's really one of the hardest parts for people that want to be friends, but it's just emotionally impossible. And by me walking away and cutting him off, it broke my heart. That's where it broke my heart in 7 places really comes into play. Because it was just really devastating to me. And like I said, all that anger and all that hatred, and there's, many poems to attest to this, it built up until he died, and I felt like I had been the one. I felt like I was the car that hit him. And years later, I've come to terms with our relationship that we had. Looking back, we really weren't a perfect match. We weren't a perfect fit. But when you're in the midst of all that heartbreak, it can seem like you'll never find anyone else. And I actually went on to get married to someone I love way more. We're much better suited for each other. But I'll never forget that first love, because it just makes an impact on you. And I also try to make it a point in my life now not to hold grudges or hate or regrets towards people, because that situation really taught me that people can be gone in the blink of an eye. They're there one minute, the next they're not. So I would encourage you, if someone has hurt you or broken your heart, you don't have to hang around them. I'm not saying that, but I would try to forgive them, because the guilt that I had and coming to terms with my own emotions after he died, that was brutal, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So yeah, that's Tachycardia. Whew, really heavy and depressing stuff, I know, but I think some of my best poems came from that period. I feel like when we're really emotional, or, whether it's happy, sad, angry, fearful, it really brings out the best imagery in us and the best words. And I think that's one of those pieces. You read it years later and you remember exactly why you wrote it and how you felt when you wrote it. So that's video number 2 of the live reading and discussion of Daisy or Paralytic Processes poems. The next one, I believe, is going to be Silence and Separation. And that's actually a happy one. It's about me writing to my future husband, who I'm actually married to now. So continue to read and write, and don't give up on yourself. Thank you so much for the support that you give me. It really makes my day. Keep pushing those requests towards me for poems that you may not understand, or you just want to hear read, or whatever you feel like doing, because I'm happy to do it. Feel free to subscribe if you have a YouTube channel, because there will definitely be more videos coming. And I hope y'all have a wonderful day and stay cool, because it's really hot outside. Bye.